we're going to be highlighting our Paralympians from Tokyo 2020. And we've got our head Paralympic coach here, Ellen Minzner, who will be moderating this panel. Before we get to Ellen, though, we do have another award presentation. We have the Jack Kelly Award. Little video is going to play. Super excited. Dear friend Kate Johnson is the recipient. And Sarah, let's go ahead and click to the video.
The Jack Kelly Award is given to an outstanding individual who represents the ideals that Kelly exemplified: superior achievements in rowing, service to amateur athletics, and success in their chosen profession, thereby serving as an inspiration to American rowers. This year's recipient is Kate Johnson.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. We're still seeing people pour in, but I think we're going to go ahead and get going. And like I said, I'm going to be kicking it over to Ellen. I'm going to monitor the chat. If you ask questions in the chat in the Q&A that I know we're going to be covering later, I'm not going to interject, but if you guys have questions in the moment for our panelists or for Ellen, please don't be quiet. This is meant to be interactive. It's meant to be a discussion. So please don't shy away from anything. Please put it in there, and you can private message me, put it in the chat, or again, you can use the Q&A, especially if it's something maybe that's off topic that you want to hear about later. Go ahead and utilize the Q&A with that. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our moderator, Ellen Minzner. Thanks, Ellen.
All right, thank you, Brett. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with our Paralympic silver medalists. I do have a quick correction, though. I'm not the head coach. The coaching honors of this crew go to Shayla Donahoe and Tom West, who put in a lot of work over the last couple of years, and especially this summer, to make this crew a success. But I'm the high performance director for US Para Rowing, and I couldn't be happier to be able to share with everyone here today some of the experiences from Tokyo, some takeaways that that we can maybe bring to the rest of the world that's not necessarily connected to para rowing, and just to share some of the let the athletes share some of their personal experiences of the Tokyo Paralympics, excuse me. So maybe I'm just going to ask each athlete to give a brief introduction, your name, your number of years on the team, your hometown, and where you rowed in college. That would be great to let the audience know who you are and where you're from. John, do you want to start?
Yeah. So my name's John Tangway. I'm from New Jersey. I've been on the team since 2019, so 2 years now. And what were the other questions?
Where'd you row in college?
I rowed for Columbia in New York City.
Great. Great. And Danny.
Hi, I'm Danny Hansen. I've been on the US team since 2014, so 7 years. I'm from Patterson, California, and I went to school at University of Washington, and that's where I learned how to row. Hey, Zoe.
That's awesome. So you guys are two members of the PR3 Mixed Four crew that won the silver medal at this year's Paralympic Games. You're being honored with the Isabelle Bone Award for this year, honoring those who have opened up opportunities for people with disabilities. You were honored at Fenway before you went to Fenway Park. That was in Boston where we trained. Honored at Fenway Park before you went to the games. Danny and some other local athletes were honored again at Fenway after the games. And Danny, you're a two-time Paralympic medalist now from 2016 and the Tokyo Games. John, it's your first year on a Paralympic squad, stroking this year. I want to know what it feels like to be legends of the rowing world this year with all those accomplishments. How does it all feel?
John, you want to take it away?
Oh, no, yeah. Legends is a strong word. I still feel like a boy from Jersey. But I guess like putting it in context with like the 2020 getting delayed, and I guess our boat, and then everything that went on at the games, and our boat being, the only U.S. team to medal. I guess like putting in context now, it does feel pretty incredible. And especially having our small team in Boston, our small group training. I'm only looking back on it more and more fondly as time passes since the summer. And since Danny's here, sharing it with Danny, especially, not many people know this, but I tried out for the team in 2014. So it was me and Danny's first time. I didn't make it. Danny did, clearly. So putting that into context too, that story arc does make it pretty special.
Yeah, cool. And
I think it's been pretty cool just because like John said, John and I's first year trying out for the team was 2014. So I feel like he and I have seen it from, I don't know, start from like, we had, selection camp was very different back then. It looked a lot different this year. I just feel like it's been pretty cool. I think the coolest part being here for so long and being able to be a legend is just being able to see what it looked like before that. So I thought it was pretty cool to see how it's grown and see how many people have kind of gotten behind us since then, because back in the day, I don't know if we had very many fans. So now I feel like people starting to believe in us a little more, and that gives us a little bit more momentum. We add that to our practice, and
I think also that maybe hard to think of yourselves as legends, because you guys have quite frankly made it look easy. Since we had a influx of new rowers in that 2014 year, been on the medal stand pretty consistently. Consistently, I'll just say that, been on the medal stand every time. So when you make it look easy, you maybe feel like it's a foregone conclusion. But I think the competition, not only has our program in the US grown and strengthened, but the field has grown and strengthened quite a bit. You look at the Canadians were bronze medalists in 2016, not even in the A final at the Tokyo Games. So I think not many people appreciate how deep and competitive the field is really getting. So I can appreciate that maybe you don't quite feel like legends yet, but what you guys accomplished this year was like nothing short of spectacular. So I do hope you can appreciate that. One thing I think that we really want to make an impression on is how you guys got your start in rowing. Because you got your start in rowing and then para rowing. And I think that's true of both of you. So if you could maybe tell a little bit about how you got started, like why rowing, and then how that introduction to para rowing, or how you discovered that you had eligibility, or how that went. So I think that would be great for our audience to hear.
Yeah, I'll start if you want, John. I started rowing at University of Washington. My mom rowed there with Bob Ernst. I'll shout her out. She's national champion for 81 and 82. So go Huskies. But yeah, I was introduced to Bob when I was in Seattle, and got to talk to him, showed us around, and he asked me if I wanted to be on the crew team there, and I'd never rowed before. So I thought that was obviously insane because it was a D1 sport, and I was like, there's no way. But as everyone here knows, that's fairly common in rowing to bring people as walk-ons to college. So that's where I started, and my teammate there, Eleni Englert, was actually in the Paralympic boat for 2012, and she told me that with my Erb's palsy condition that I would classify, and I had not even fathomed that was possible for me. So Eleni helped me get in touch with Ellen Minzner here, and Ellen had me send in a time, and I just remember everyone from my boat at UW just in the Erb Bay around me just screaming their heads off as I was just like flailing my body around trying to get a good 2K score. So that's how I started with para, and it was pretty cool. It's pretty cool getting there. Yeah. What about you, John?
So I grew up playing, basketball, lacrosse, baseball. But because of my disability, I was born with bilateral club feet and had various reconstructive surgeries, and it limits my ability to run. So sports that involved running, like baseball, basketball, couldn't do that anymore. So it was like the summer after 8th grade. Wasn't playing any sports, didn't have a job or anything. My mom gave me an ultimatum, said either go to this rowing camp that I found out about or get a job. So I started rowing. I went to the Learn to Row camp at Mercer in New Jersey and loved it. Was taught how to row by Emily Reagan. And what else? And then I rowed for a few years, and then Jenny, who was the coxswain in the Rio boat for the PR3 4, she was coaching at Mercer and noticed that I wasn't going on the team runs and asked me why. And then I explained, and then she reached out to Ellen, and the rest was history. Then I was ID'd. I went to the 2014 selection camp, and then so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So.
Now, that's really cool. So at least Danny, you kind of indicated that the reaction to your maybe having this possibility sounds like it was really positive, like you were going to submit an ERD score, so your team was really gung-ho about helping you achieve that. So reception was fairly positive from friends, teammates, coaches about this as a possibility.
Yeah, I think that's something that I didn't take for granted, was the fact that I realized how much support I had from my teammates, from my family, from my friends at the time. And of course, like, you know, PTs and coaches and everything, like my coaches were pumped that I was going to be trying out for the team. And yeah, I think that the one thing that's so funny to me is that whenever I hear any of these stories that we people who find their way to para rowing selection camp literally find their way, I feel like it's never really it's always a different story. There's never really one thing where people are like, oh yeah, this is something we've known about, this is something we were taught about. You know, I feel like if there are a ton of PTs out there who knew about, you know, that you could just go and try out for teams, and I feel like that would be a lot more popular. But for some reason, I don't think a lot of athletes necessarily know about it unless they've learned by word of mouth. So
yeah, well, we're going to change that at this convention. We're going to change that. I know there's some coaches on the call here, so think about those athletes who are restricted from running, et cetera, et cetera. You know, they could be your next John Tangway or Danny Hansen. John, any similarities or differences with your start in para rowing, or well received by friends and family, great opportunity, or?
Yeah, I mean, this was more of a personal thing, but I sort of started out, you know, growing up with my disability. It was like I did deal with a fair amount of teasing in sporting contexts, and even sometimes in the rowing context too, that sort of made me shun it a little and just, you know, put my head down and say, you know, I'm not disabled. And which rowing lends itself pretty well to that, given, like, well, specifically my disability, because you're seated the whole time. You know, I was obviously beating a lot of able-bodied people, which made me feel good. And I competed, you know, at the highest collegiate level in the world at Columbia, in the Ivy Leagues and at IRAs and all that stuff. And yeah, I would say, like, in the future, I hope that would change, you know, given more people are aware of, you know, our mission and our experiences and that sort of thing, and hopefully that changes. But yeah, but also I don't want that to overshadow all the positives, because there was a lot of positive support. So I don't want to understate that.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit of a different animal there, but I think the real emphasis is on, you know, generally speaking, as you emerge from your high school and collegiate programs, obviously coming back after international competition,
Yeah.
You still have that, you're on that same stage as your counterparts on the senior team. So the international experience, the training that's necessary at that level. Generally speaking, some of you had made the team while you were still in college, and being able to come back and contribute to the teams that you were already on, I think has got to have really opened up a lot of coaches' eyes. I mean, we've had athletes from, Michigan, Sacred Heart, Gonzaga, as those coaches see the growth of and development as you guys as athletes, little by little, we are growing the understanding about what it means to compete on the Paralympic team, especially for athletes that are going to be best suited to develop within the current collegiate and high school systems. Now, that's not exactly the case for the PR1 and PR2, and we'll be talking about that later in convention. But I think that's a really great thing for coaches to know that if they find an athlete in their squad, that athlete will gain the same notoriety, fitness skills, mental racing skills as anyone on a senior or U23 team. So
and I would note that after we won the silver medal in 2019, I still had my senior year at Columbia to go, and I would say even some of the guys on the team didn't even know I had a disability. And sort of they looked at me a little differently after that.
I met one of your teammates on a committee call, and he said, I already knew that guy was amazing. Then I knew this. Then now he's really amazing. So you have a fan base there at Columbia for sure. I also think a lot of people really maybe don't understand that training at the elite para level is a serious time commitment. What was your motivation? I mean, rowing's already enough, juggling school and work on any competitive team. What motivated you to go for the Paralympics? And then we'll talk a little bit about COVID, like the delay of those games. So all of that training geared toward a single point in time that was moved. I've heard from different athletes that helped their motivation, and from others that it really hindered that. Like, tell me first, why Paralympics? What motivated that, and how did COVID maybe impact that?
I guess my initial motivation, just because of the timing, because I was rowing in college, and the timing worked out pretty well, where I thought, like, why not Tokyo? Why not? I already did Austria. We qualified the boat. Let's go for that gold. And sort of, I was very motivated after 2019, and sort of just went into the chute, as they say. And I think I realized in Tokyo, being there at the Paralympics after the opening ceremony, I sort of realized the why. As I was a part of the bigger movement, the Paralympic movement, the We the 15, all that. That sort of became that filled my motivation when I was there. And being able to bring home a medal and represent the Team USA, the Paralympic team, I think that sort of became my purpose in the sport.
Can you explain a little bit what We the 15 is? I think those of us in the rowing world, we make all kinds of assumption that everybody knows what we're talking about. But explain We the 15. I agree, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so We the 15 is, I believe it was started by the International Paralympic Committee, and its whole mission is to increase awareness of people with disabilities throughout the world. And We the 15, meaning 15% of the world of people live with disabilities. And I really resonate with it because its point is to go beyond the Paralympics. Like, not every person living with a disability is training for the Paralympics. It's basically just increasing general awareness and empowerment, and just treating everyone like equals, not some special case, but and yeah, it's not everyone's so inspired or something like that, but so yeah, so that's We the 15. Feel free to look it up. It's a great mission. But.
Yeah, great. Danny, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I when I'm thinking about why I did Tokyo, it's kind of funny because it's like, yeah, why? Because, you know, it was like that was the hardest thing I've done, I think. I was super demotivated. I was like, I don't know if I can even do this. This is really difficult. It's taking 5 years. Shouldn't have taken this long. You know, I've been here since 2014. Like, what the heck? But basically, I just remember sitting at the closing ceremonies at Rio, which is and just watching the hype video for Tokyo and sitting there and being like, yeah, they got me. You know, like, okay, I'm going back. Like, I have to do this again because this is sick. And then when COVID happened and everything, I was like, wow, like, I was super demotivated. I had just gone through a major concussion. I wasn't doing well. I think you were fairly aware of that, Ellen. And I was like, I need to like figure out how to do this. I got really, had to get really into meditation, try to figure out where, like, you know, find some peace, figure out how to relax from the inside and figure that out. And then with COVID and everything, it was like, how do I do this? And I think at the end of the day, it was like, well, like my first year of rowing at University of Washington, it was so hard. I was like, I wanted to quit. And then I was like, I've never quit anything in my life. So I was like, well, I have to figure it out. And to me, it was like that all over again. I don't like to quit. And when things become really difficult, the best thing you could do for yourself, your self-esteem, your future self, and everything is to figure out a way to get it done. And so I think just like the closure of it, being like, yes, it's possible for me. I'm not going to go the rest of my life being like, well, I could have tried out, because that would have been lame. That would have not been cool. I wouldn't have liked to feel that way. So for me, it was more like, how do I want to feel when Tokyo 2020 is over? And I want to feel like I did the best that I possibly could. And at the end of the day, I think it went pretty well. So yeah.
Agreed.
I'm proud of
Danny,
it. It was hard. It was definitely a difficult personal journey for me there.
well done. One of the things that's unique about you also is you were the only returning member from the 2016 crew. And again, so many changes have happened over the last few years that I think people don't even remember. Like, Rio was 1,000 meters.
Yeah.
And a lot has changed since then. So now we're 2,000. And then, you know, if you want to come back for 2028, it's only 1,500. So what are your thoughts about that 2K distance? They talked about that earlier in convention today. And, you know, what is your thoughts about the differences between the two? Do you have a preference? Do you want it over quicker? Do you want it to last longer? What do you want?
Of course I have a preference. I have a 2K preference because that's Olympic distance. It should have been Paralympic distance the whole time. I feel like when we were doing 1K, it was like you do all this training and then in 3 minutes, which is basically a blink of an eye if you include the adrenaline, it's over. And so it's like, well, how can we actually make this like a real race and not just like a panic induced like sprint? You know, everyone's out of 40 the whole time. You know, in Rio, there was for some reason just like wakes coming out of who knows where. But anyway, yeah, no, I'm very glad it's 2K. I'm super pumped that I've been able to row both distances and I'm able to have that, you know, but I think the funny thing about 2028 is like, what the heck is going on with that? I do have thoughts about the 1,500 possible distance. I'm saying possible because I really hope that that's reconsidered for the purposes of the athletes. I feel like it's really cool now because John, you can probably relate to this too, is like the fact that we were able to do 2K for the first time this year, we can now actually say, okay, like, this is the 2K distance compared to an Olympic, you know, Olympic for Olympic quad or whatever. We can have those comparisons. If you take away the ability to compare times for 1 year, not even a whole quadrennial, but just a 1 year in 2028, what is going on? I'm sorry, I'm not gonna get too
That's
heated about
okay.
this, but I'll say one more
It'd be
thing.
for
one more
open
thing.
and para, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Not for para.
No, I know, I'm aware of that. But it's like, that's the thing. It's like that affects everybody. That's just, it doesn't only affect para this time around. It affects everybody. But I will say, when we were in Tokyo and COVID was happening and everything was going on, it was very cool to me to be able to go to the venue and see how much effort was put into the venue despite everything having happened with COVID, people wanting it to shut down and everything. Like I felt very empowered. I felt like our race mattered. I felt like our event mattered. I felt like the sport mattered, just and solely based off of the volunteers and all the work that they put into the venue there. And I feel like if we are deciding 8 years out that, you know, rowing, let's just make it 1500. I don't know if there's going to be that much of a feeling, because that's pretty impactful on the athletes, and it will be impactful on the results. So I hope that's reconsidered.
Yeah, maybe you should join the LA 2028 committee. They might like to hear that. But you also brought up like one of my next questions that I would love to hear from you both on. Like, I agree that the Tokyo Games were incredibly accessible as well. I think they went to great lengths to have the physical infrastructure accommodate every disability. And there's some really powerful messaging around that. I learned of a term called the curb cut effect, which is just, you know, when people, I think it was in Berkeley, California, wanted curb cuts to be on city intersections, it was sort of, there's a lot of pushback. So it's a special interest issue. It's only going to affect a small number of people. So, you know, Berkeley being as it is, they went around and put like little mini homemade cement ramps that were just basically, you know, connecting the curb to the roadway. And what they realized was that everyone started using them, like the tourist with the wheeling luggage, the guy with the hot dog stand wanting to get on the sidewalk, you know, everyone was using the curb cuts. So, you know, in certain circles, the curb cut effect means when we think we take a change that is going to maybe impact what we had originally consider a small special interest group, actually really benefits everybody. And that was what kept coming up for me when we were in Tokyo, that I do not have a disability, but I was in no way hindered or excluded by the fact that everything was set up for people with disabilities. I think it was a really powerful message that the Tokyo Organizing Committee did a fabulous job on. And I really felt that vibe, in addition to, you know, just the physical, the way it was set up. So I don't know if you guys felt that way, but I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, I feel like it was very inclusive, and on top of that, it just becomes like when you increase the efficiency of one part, you increase the efficiency of the whole. And I feel like that goes with just like with everybody, and not just in the village, but like outside. You know, we're all one human race out here. I don't get too mushy gushy, but like really, like, you know, if you can, like John was saying, if you can help the efficiency of 15% of the population, imagine how much of an effect that will have on 100% of the population. I feel like that was very cool to be able to see, and something that yeah, the village is just cool. Paralympic Village, you see so many different people doing so many different things, and it's just like it's like a big dance, you know, everyone's moving around, it's a big flow, and it's very inspiring. So that was cool. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested, Danny, and Ellen, compared to the Rio village, but given this was my only experience, now I'm just going to think every Paralympics is like this, or every organizing committee goes to this amount of lengths to accommodate everyone. Because I would want to commend the workers and the country of Japan for like putting on such an amazing accessible utopia for disabled people. But yeah, it was really great. Definitely come away from it with a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that's true because we
miss it,
yeah.
right? Don't you miss it? You're like, oh wow, that was such a nice place to be.
Yeah, and I do think there was a difference between Rio and Tokyo because we were in lockdown in Tokyo. We didn't leave the village ever. So all you saw was that village or the race venue the entire time, unless, you know, you had a special hotel to go to. But I think being for that amount of time just concentrated in the village and in the village only without leaving and touring around, I think it did heighten our awareness of what that environment really meant, and to see so many other people with every type of disability, which is just another feature of who they are as people. And oh, by the way, they're trying to be the best in the world at what they do. I think I felt more connected to that because the village was locked down and excluded, and we were constantly there for all meals, meetings, etc. So I do think it was more powerfully, I felt it was a more powerful message for sure. Yeah. And what surprised you the most about the Tokyo Games, Paralympics, the competition, the venue? Anything surprised you guys more than anything?
I think something that I still think about on a regular basis after leaving is just how much of the volunteers' heart and soul that they put into literally every single task they had. There were people, there were volunteers there who their job was to stand on one of the corners with a sign telling you where to go and directing, like literally just directing people, and how much of themselves they would pour into that job for however many hours they were standing there. It just made me feel, you know, this much better, this much better, this much better, whatever, every time that I saw that. And I think that actually made me just feel more inspired to just do better, just because I knew, well, the only people that are able to be here right now are these people who are volunteering to be here, and they are really acting like they want to be here, and they're really pumped about it. And I want to do something. I want to do something for them, and not just for our country, but obviously for our country. But like, I thought that was really inspiring, and something I still think about today, long after we've left.
Yeah, for sure.
I gave them a lot of my USA pins.
They love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was awesome. You know, and I think that message really resonates because I think we have a lot that we can share with the broader rowing community and the broader, you know, community in general, but certainly with our own how we think about inclusivity, not even just from the athlete's perspective, but you know, how we want to make all of our events more inclusive. I think that there was some talk about, you know, the creativity and the accessibility in indoor rowing and the different formats that are available there, and with coastal rowing. And I think we really want to take that message, you know, to our own communities and make sure that our coaches in coach education or any other field, like really understand like what it means to be accessible. It's not just the occasional para athlete that may pass through your program, which is probably a, you know, once in a decade type of occurrence for most collegiate or high school programs. But how do we really create that message of accessibility for domestic events, domestic regattas or what have you? I think that we can really learn a lot from that. And I think there's already some comments in the chat about the curb cut effect and how inclusive design and universal design really do make it better for everybody. And I think those are some great messages that we want to, you know, communicate to people. I think there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. I don't wonder.
There are, Ellen, and I was holding off partially because I don't want you to give away too much about, because you have another talk tomorrow.
Yeah, that's okay.
Going over the pipeline.
This message cannot be over reinforced. We already have taken for granted, like, what is We the 15? We know what that is. We need people to know. So I don't think we can repeat ourselves too often. In fact, we probably should amplify. And, I see there's like 48, 50 people on this call. We need you to also amplify this message in your communities and your programs, because I know that not all of you are directly connected to para rowing at the moment with an athlete or a coach. So I think it's fine to jump into the questions, and if there's more material that gets reinforced, all the better.
Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and ask what's in the Q&A, but I have some follow-up questions because I think these are speaking specifically to the para pipeline.
Gotcha.
Which obviously that's what Danny and John have gone through. But I think, we also probably have a lot of coaches where it's, even if you don't have an athlete that maybe is on that track, I think we could definitely discuss some best practices for programs on just how to be more inclusive and more welcoming, especially that intake process when athletes first arrive. But anyway, we'll get to that. So what recommendations would you all suggest for junior coaches when it comes to helping a young person find their way to para opportunities?
Sure. I'll let the athletes talk, but then I have some follow-up to that. So any advice there, John or Danny?
I say the earlier that you can get a communication going between Ellen and the athletes, the better it's gonna go. That's what I would say. I wish I had started earlier, but
Great.
I guess from my experience, I would say like my high school coach, and no fault to his own really, like when I would say, I can't run, or I was limited in some way, that was sort of the end of the conversation. Given like, I don't need to go into detail with my coach, like what exactly, give him all the forms and stuff. But basically just having that conversation, I think would have gone a long way for me with my coach, asking like, what exactly can and can't you do? And that sort of thing. And given, I think maybe if he also was aware of the sort of the para rowing and that potential pipeline, I think that would have expedited the process a lot more. So I think it's just connecting the two. And then if they're comfortable, like having that conversation with the athlete of what their limitations are. Because often, one limitation can be a springboard for another anything. So I think
And John, you touch on a shift in how we're approaching things as well. So you guys mentioned like how you found your way literally to para rowing, and you're exactly right, John, involving the coach as early in the conversation as possible. So especially for PR3, who, as we said, they're already generally involved in high school or collegiate programs, we want to communicate to the coach as early on and say, we're not trying to poach athletes from your program. We want to know who they are. The best way they're going to develop is to remain competitive in those programs. And we want to support the athletes' development within those systems, but just being able to be aware, and so that we are on track with deadlines for classification, et cetera. You're exactly right, John. We have a big effort that we're going to talk about later in convention about how we're working with coaches early on to increase that awareness and make it easy and worthwhile for them to refer athletes into the program, and not feel like, well, we're going to pull somebody out of your varsity 4, your varsity 8, and they've got to go to this other thing. So we know we want long-term athlete development for our Paralympians as well as our Olympians. And we are in fact involving the coaches as early in the process. So the answer to whoever posed the question, yes, please get in touch with us as soon as possible. And that might mean all we do is keep track of you and give you information. Very similar to a high school student getting into the recruiting process. Initially, it's just an information exchange, and there's no pulling of athletes out of programs. It's a bit different for the PR1 and the PR2, but even still, we want to hear from you as early as possible, because those are the programs where coaches and athletes may need a bit more guidance to get to that next level. Where if we know you're at University of Washington or Columbia or Michigan or wherever, we know you're in a good spot. We know you're getting good coaching. We know you're in a competitive place to improve. We don't need to fix what's not broken. And for the PR1 and PR2, they just have a less clearly defined existing pathway. So we do want to try and point those coaches and athletes in the right direction as early as possible. But again, still working with those coaches and keep the athletes in the environment where they're most comfortable until they're ready to move on to the next level. So great question, and no harm in repeating that many times throughout the convention.
So Ellen, is the best vehicle for that just to email you directly? Like, I think, for example, if we're talking about a junior level athlete, we have the USRowing website, and then we have now the ODP website that they can go to get more information, to get identified for those opportunities. So what would be the process for parents?
Honestly, we have a baseline metrics form that we started, and you can fill out this form even if you are not even a rower yet. Basically, it's some general characteristics about yourself, a push-up test, an inverted row test, and who are you, what's your coach, do you need to be connected to a resource? And what that does is get you on our radar to be in touch with a coach or an athlete. But it also helps us gather data. We want to get a lot of data on general characteristics of people involved in para rowing right now. And from that initial baseline metrics form, which is on the website on the para national team, we can then pretty much see by age and some of those general characteristics and whether they've been involved in rowing before. Do we need to focus on domestic programs for them where they can gain experience and skills and coaching? Or is this an athlete we need to quickly take a look at and make sure they have the resources because they may be at a development or even a senior team level based on where we're finding people? So we've started that this fall. I've got about 20 responses so far, including an athlete who was on the track and field team from Tokyo, including an athlete who found us through CrossFit. That may have some long-term potential. So it's a very egalitarian form. If you don't know if you're classified, you can still fill it out. And it does help us gain some general understanding about what type of athletes would be most suitable for the Paralympic categories. And we also know there's a whole range of athletes who may not have either Paralympic eligibility or for whom more recreational competition might be better. And then we can appropriately direct them toward Deb Arenberg or other people within USRowing that can help identify those resources for them. So that's a great place to start. I can probably grab the link from you. I see you just threw the.
I just put the link to the para page, and I believe it's on there.
Yeah, it's the first thing called baseline metrics, and that's one of the first entryways to connect with someone from the high performance staff on the para side.
Great. Awesome. Well, if it's okay, I would like to ask, I'm going to put my director of coaching education hat on. And I think, I run our level 2 trainings, and we certified over 300 coaches in 2021 virtually. And I'm on every single one. And we definitely have injected a fair amount of both para and adaptive all throughout, not just here's the chapter, check the box, how, these are things that you're going to encounter every day. And some of the biggest questions that I get from coaches are coaches of, traditional rowing programs, all across the States, who they don't have maybe an adaptive specific program, but they have an athlete come to them where either it's a parent or not a parent. I think there's a spectrum, and I'm sure Danny and John, both of you, in your experience there, maybe people didn't know that you had limitations when you first arrived. It just depends. And especially on the sport. I guess if they asked you to run at the very beginning, John, you might have to say something to them. But what advice, John and Danny, would you have for coaches on what are some small things that what are things that they may not even know they're doing at the onset, like the intake, that novice rowing process, that they might even realize they're doing that are actually being exclusive. They're excluding people, or, if you want to frame it in the positive, what can they do on the positive side of that? Danny, I saw you chirp up.
Yeah, something that I've been very, 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 that's been very good for me in my career is that I've always had coaches who have very open communication with me about my capabilities. It's also been very much on me and my responsibility and to figure things out, which I think is the best case scenario. That's a very empowering feeling when your coach says, are you able to do this? And I can say yes, or I can say not yet. And those are my 2 answers. I cannot say no, but I can say not yet. And that's been very encouraging for me. I think that something to keep in mind is keeping conversations like that in private, so not in front of a ton of people, because that can get really difficult, especially if not all of your teammates know about your disability yet, which was the case for me for a little while, and on some other teams that I've been on, I had this disability and my teammates didn't yet know about it. So I think that's something. And then of course, just like keeping in mind other, just discussing it with only the athlete and not with other athletes either. So if the captain of the team sees that, you know, you're skipping out on runs or you're not doing stuff and they have a problem with it, don't discuss it with other people unless you have the athletes permission. Yes. Yeah, permission. Thank you. Sorry.
It's okay.
Today. But yeah, so I think just like keeping open communication and making sure that the athlete is responsible for getting the work done, because at the end of the day, if you have the disability, I can promise you that it's difficult enough to go try out for the team and put yourself out there. So if you have an athlete with a disability on the team, they want to be there, they want to get the work done, and they're going to do it the best way they possibly know how. So trust that, and just be someone who they can lean on when they're trying to figure it out. So that's what I'd say.
John, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with Danny. I think that's open and direct communication with the athlete can be a powerful thing, especially with junior rowing, with athletes that are at still a very impressionable age. I think just having an understanding between the coach and the athlete can make a hell of a difference with their involvement in the sport, their enjoyment of the sport. Because like Danny said, a lot of times the hardest part is showing up. So for athletes, the hardest part is already done. They showed up, they're there, they want to be there. Don't make it harder for them, and don't put up unnecessary barriers. Because a lot of times too, if they're living with disability, they already have enough of a barrier to begin with. And, you know, coming into rowing, it's, I mean, Danny, no, it can open up limitless possibilities. And it can be really sad when an athlete maybe doesn't feel like their coach hears them or sees them or sort of understands them. So yeah, like Danny said, you know, in a very casual, it can be casual, direct way, just sort of being on the same page with them. And yeah, not making it really anyone's business, because, you know.
And I think one thing that I noticed, or at least maybe some of the athletes commented on this in Tokyo, when we're immersed in that environment where it is the norm to have a disability, you much less often, if at all, or rarely got, ooh, what happened to you? I mean, that's just not, that's not the appropriate question. And especially as coaches, like, you know, well, what can you do? How can we work around this? How do you get yourself to full slide? And being, I just think an air of curiosity in a respectful way is probably the best way to go. But, you know, sort of like what happened to you is a question that is already off-putting, and it can really create even a conversational barrier. So, you know, a lot of times people ask me, oh, Ellen, you know, what kind of disabilities do the athletes have? I'm like, I have no idea. All I know is like this person needs a 42-degree foot stretcher angle, and this person, you know, we need to bring their rigging in a bit tighter to make sure they have enough length. So, you know, I could probably do a better job about making sure I fully understand all of those things, but also think it at least is a framework that I try and approach with it about how can we optimize this person? And when you get right down to it, that's what coaching is. We're here to optimize human performance. And the athlete with a disability or limitation is just adds a layer of complexity to that whole puzzle that as coaches, we're already trying to figure out, you know, what's the right stroke rating? What is optimal for our athletes? Every program probably has, you know, one athlete who is doesn't row as long as the rest of the crew or whatever. Like, we're still going to optimize the athletes. And that's what it is about. If an athlete can meet the minimum requirements to be on the program and be successful there, how do we optimize the athlete? And I think that's a healthy approach, and is a bit the opposite of like, what happened to you,
Well, and you're focusing on what they
what's
can
wrong
do.
with you.
You're focusing on
yeah.
like, you're in a lot of ways, I'm not concerned with what you can't do. I want to know what you can do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And a lot. And actually, go ahead, Danny.
Oh, I just wanted to add also, that can look like a lot of different ways, and that really depends on the athlete as well. I think that something to keep in mind is it can look as casual as just a check-in once a week. Like, hey, is there anything that I can help with this week? And yes, no. If it's a no, that's fine. Move on. I don't think I had almost any discussions about my Erb's palsy with my coaches at University of Washington, like ever. So, I talked to the weights coach the most probably about it, just because for me that was the most difficult thing. But other than that, I don't think there was much to talk about. Unless I was having trouble with something, I could just nod over to Bob or Yaz or Connor Bullis and just be like, hey, and they'd be like, got it. And it's not a big deal. Never punished for anything, never made to do any extra work unless I asked to do that. So I think the one thing is it's very difficult to treat every athlete the same. And that's something that I think Ellen has done a very good job with as well. It's just like, all right, you're Danny Hansen, you have Erb's palsy, what do you need? Okay, you're John Tangway, you have this, what do you need? And it's going to be different per athlete. So I think just to keep that in mind as well.
And there's a question that had come in the chat, and I'm going to loop that into what I'm about to say. But Ellen, you said something earlier, and Danny, you also just touched on a little bit, meeting the program standards. I think that's also a question that we get a lot in our coach certification. Is like, how far should accommodations go? If you don't have it, and I'm not talking about a specific adaptive program. I'm talking about, an athlete that, what are the standards for the program? Like, how should coaches handle that situation where we want them to make, how can we make this work for this person? But after doing that, like, is there a point where you say, this isn't the right fit, or like, we don't have what you need, or we need to refer you to someone else? Like, I think that's a question a lot of coaches struggle with too. So Ellen, I think I'll go to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I think we can definitely learn a lot from other sport and activities, especially outdoor sports. What I think we all should really think about as programs is, what are the essential eligibility criteria for your program? Because just because a person has a disability doesn't mean they would have a successful, productive, and enjoyable experience in the program that you have. So I'll just give an example. I think it's like REI or some of these outdoor schools. They're going to have a hike, and the essential eligibility criteria is like, you got to carry a pack up a 12-degree incline without assistance for X amount of time. Pretty easy. I might not have a disability, but there's a lot of that I won't do. And I can read pretty easily that this is not a hike for me. So I think we ought to get really good at establishing our essential eligibility criteria. If it is absolutely required that an athlete must carry their own equipment, you don't have enough coaches or volunteers to do that, that's a sort of very rudimentary example. But if the essential eligible criteria are that it would universally apply to everyone, not just that one individual, well, you can't do this, you can't be on the program. Well, this is a criteria that would apply to anyone on the team. And I think that if we got good at that, we would also be able to effectively redirect somebody toward a program that would be better suited to them. And I see this example a lot in competitive high school programs where they want to be more inclusive. We may have to get creative about how to create different programs or satellite programs that would work for an athlete, but not every athlete who has a disability is going to have a fun, enjoyable, productive experience on any given program. So if the program can get good at establishing those essential eligibility criteria that would apply to everyone, not just an extra test that the blind athlete would have to do that the other athletes don't, then I think we would feel a lot more comfortable as coaches to welcome the athlete who meets those criteria and let them develop, and then redirect the athlete who simply would not meet those criteria. And I want people to understand the difference. I want all coaches to be able to know how to do that. And we have a lot of adaptive programs that are getting really good at expanding their opportunities for different types of disabilities, and we want to improve that. But not every program is suitable for every athlete with a disability.
I agree with that, and I also want to add that there's also like Ellen's saying, adaptability is something that comes into play a lot here. I feel like if there's something that needs to be done, and for some reason an athlete cannot get it done in the same way, there's like a million different ways to do everything. So I would say definitely encouraging athletes with disabilities to adapt and find a different way to get something done, a different way to get the same thing done. There's always going to be a way to figure it out. So I think that's also something to have in your back.
I think that dovetails into the question, the Q&A, which John, I'm going to put to you, because I believe this is something you deal with. You know, what are the alternatives that you've done? Because, you know, as you said, like, you can't run. And let's do, like, you know, if you need equipment, okay, but like, what about when there isn't you're at a regatta, there's no alternative, like the team's doing a warm-up run, you're having the whole team do a warm-up run, and you have an athlete that can't run. So if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. With equipment, I always did the bike, or if I was feeling a little sneaky, I would sneak away and get my technique work done on the erg while everyone was busy running and exhausting themselves. I would work on my technique. But no equipment. God, I would have to ask. I don't know. I typically resorted to sort of doing circuit stuff, or usually in like in a regatta context, it would be a warm-up run. Forget Danny. What would I do? Would I do anything?
You did a lot of extra stretching, and you did a lot of rolling out of your feet. Remember that?
Yeah,
roll your feet before you compete. That's what he would say. He'd say, roll your feet before you compete. He'd say that every time.
Yeah. Any way to get the legs warm, whether that's air squats or.
And when you're doing bike, so let's just say the workout, okay, they're going to go do a 60-minute run.
Yeah.
What would you do on the bike? Would you equate it, or would you do extra?
I would do time and a half or double.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it's in college, we would do biathlons, so a 10K erg and an 8-mile run. Sometimes I just did 2 10Ks. Sometimes I would just do a 20K bike on the erg bike, because we had erg bikes, or the equivalent time. So yeah, it's just like the adaptability. You just sort of figure it out.
I think what you said, John, is good too. Is like, what's the objective? If you're going on a warm-up run, what's the objective of that? The objective is to warm up your legs. So warm up your legs in a different way with air squats. If the objective is to get cardio in a different way. There's just like, I think knowing what the objective of the running is, and then doing something that attains the same objective.
If the team's doing hill repeats, you need to do some HIIT training on the bike, or
something.
Yeah, something in that.
There's always an alternative. Yeah.
Always. Yeah. And sometimes you have to be creative.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, Ellen, I think that's the end of the questions in the chat. Did you have any other ones?
No, John, Danny, anything else you wanna add to your new fan base here? We're still 47 people strong, which is like amazing for the end of the day. So we really appreciate everybody hanging in there. Any final remarks?
I just want to say thank you for spending the time with us today, and for your support, and also everyone here. I think we all know that rowing is a pretty small community, and so if you could, everyone knows that. I'm sure every coach knows at least 3 other coaches. Talk to each other, spread the word about para, get more people engaged, because I think it can only do good for the sport. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, two of the points I want to make is just that sort of universal accessibility design, like how we can incorporate that in all of our programs, because it's not just the athletes we're trying to take care of. We're trying to take care of the referee with a disability, the mom with a disability, the friend, family member, potential sponsor or donor. we want to make sure that our venues and how we do things are as accessible as possible. Even if you don't have an athlete in your program, we could be more accessible, and just getting as creative as possible. And that para-national team needs the whole of the rowing community to really help move us along in terms of, not only identifying athletes, but, applying all of the same, research and development, et cetera, to the para movement. And we're happy to chat with anyone and everybody who wants to learn more.
Mhm. John, any final comments?
Thank you all for listening to us legends. Yeah, just, I guess, to reiterate Ellen's words, just, going back to it's beyond sport. It's just life. It's humans. It's just, life's too short to exclude anyone. So, if just trying to increase awareness, and I like to think we're doing our part through rowing, but the work's far from over. So, but yeah, I'm having fun doing it. I'm happy to be here. So thank you so much for including me.
Thank you, John. And actually, the work continues. Ellen, do you want to give a little promo for your talk tomorrow?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Tomorrow, I believe it's at 2:00. I have a couple of our coaches who are going to be on for any coach who wants some more specific guidance, because what we've been able to do is break down some pathways for junior U23 developing athletes in PR1, 2, and 3, and the recommendations that we have to for athletes and coaches to begin on any of those pathways. So if you're looking for more information specific to those categories and how to get more involved in opportunities and resources that you can connect to within the para high performance team, then you should tune in tomorrow at 2:00.
Great. Yeah, I think today was really kind of more the why and, a little bit making a little bit personal. And then tomorrow's the how. Here's the pathway. Here's the pipeline. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all so much for those of you that were here with us. Thank you so much. Convention's going to keep on rolling. I especially want to thank Danny and John for being here with us. And then, of course, our high performance director for our para program, Ellen. Thank you so much.